I got to ask you, I mean, the public is interested in this, and I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, it's kind of silly and it's beneath the sport of kings. On the other hand, it has people talking about boxing, which can't be all bad. What do you make of Jake Paul, Mike Tyson? How do you feel about it? Because it is the carnival sideshow aspect, but it is going to be the boxing match in the second half of 2024 that is going to get probably, even more attention than the Usyk Fury rematch.
Yeah, I've done a couple of Jake Paul fights. They were on Showtime. We did a couple of the pay-per-views of it. And my answer when it comes to these celebrity fights and these kind of matches is, we live in a society now, don't we, where if something is marketable, it doesn't matter what it is. It'll happen, right? It is all about marketability, and that's what this is. People appear to have an appetite for it. They've had an appetite for a number of these celebrity boxing matches, and you can even include in that MMA and boxing crossover fights. And so people for whatever reason, want to see it, and if you can make $1 off it in this day and age, you can have it. And so my feeling is, in the end of the day, it means nothing to the sport of boxing. Literally nothing. It is they're all one-offs. I don't subscribe to the theory that it brings new fans or that it drives fans away. My feeling is they're one-offs, and if people want them, then they're going to keep happening.
How do you see it going down? Do you give Mike any kind of chance in this fight? He's 58 years old.
Yeah.
He's 20 years out of the ring. Jake Paul is a guy who does have some skills, even though he's been picking on UFC guys.
Yeah, if Jake Paul were a professional boxer fighting only professional boxers, he'd probably have like a 9-2 or 9-3 record. If there'd be guys they would put in front of him that he could beat. He would lose to some. And he would be a cruiserweight with a winning record, but not anything special. However, he can punch, and he does have some boxing skills, and he's, a lot younger than Mike Tyson. So, listen, in his high 50s, you worry about what could happen to Tyson in this fight, to be honest. I did Mike Tyson's last two legitimate boxing matches when he lost to Danny Williams and McBride. And, that was a long, long time ago. And he didn't perform as well in those fights as he wanted. So, it's hard to imagine that at this advanced age, he's going to discover something he didn't have in his last two fights 25 or 30 years ago. So, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to imagine him being effective in this, but I just hope everybody gets through it safely. That would be my only hope.
Yeah, absolutely. My dream would be seeing Mike pull off something astonishing, but I think you're right. The more realistic hope is just that Mike gets out of there intact. Al, real quickly here, I want to ask you a couple of non-boxing questions on the way out. Sure. Because you're a man who has many interests. But who's on your heavyweight Mount Rushmore? What is the Mount Rushmore, the heavyweight division? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ali, of course, and Lennox Lewis is on that Mount Rushmore for me because I think he's one of the most unbeatable heavyweights. And Joe Louis, of course. And then I'd probably put Jack Johnson on there because of what he had to overcome and becoming the first black heavyweight champion. And, I always, whenever you do that, I'm not huge on making, picks of the greatest this and the greatest that. And the reason is because, look, there's Mount Rushmore. We only get 4, right? So I've left off Joe Frazier. I've left off Larry Holmes. I've left off so many great heavyweights. But if I was forced to pick 4, I think those would be the 4 guys I picked.
Lennox Lewis, I think that's a great point. You were on my old podcast, probably 7 or 8 years ago, and you said that Lennox Lewis, a guy who lost two fights, and they were both kind of
Yeah,
fluky losses, right?
yeah, and
Lennox
he
never really
avenged both
got,
of them.
yeah, and he avenged both of them. So he's a guy that people don't, they sleep on him a little bit, I think, in those
I agree.
discussions. So that's a great point. All right, well, let me hit you. Al, you were in your 20s in the 70s, which I'm super jealous of because the
It was an
70s,
interesting
you
time.
got, yeah, you were the perfect age for the 70s. I came along a little too late. So tell me,
Even though you
1970s.
chronicled the 70s so well.
Yeah. It's thank you. I adopted it as my thing, but man, I'm living. I want to live vicariously through like 25-year-old Al Bernstein.
Oh
Al,
boy.
what kind of music were you listening to in the 70s? What
Well,
was like the
yeah.
what was your jam back in the day?
Well, back then, of course, the Eagles were and Bob Seger were. If I had to pick and I could say records, right? Because they were that I would wear out the grooves for. It would be the Eagles and Bob Seger probably, and a lot of great. Of course, there were so many great bands, during that era. I think the '70s and '80s produced, and everybody thinks of you when you say that, like you're just nostalgic. But I think it produced some of the greatest music we've ever had. And those would be two examples. And there were so many others that were great. And I'll tell you, it's funny for me personally. The '70s were a great decade, but then the '80s it got a lot better for me because that was when I got on television and started traveling around the United States. So the '70s and '80s to me feel almost interchangeable in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they are a pretty good block
Yeah, it's like
together of
for
time, and there
all
is.
things cultural, and they merged together a little bit to me. But yeah, the '70s were. It was an astonishing time, and we had come off the end of the '60s, where it's funny. Right now, there's a national convention in Chicago. Back in 1968, probably shouldn't admit this. Somebody will be mad at me. I was one of those people in Lincoln Park who got out barely before the tear gas hit. But so it's funny, that era was one. I was going to college, and it was a very tumultuous time in America. And then the 1970s that was when the country started to kind of come out of some of that turmoil and begin at least a somewhat more placid journey, and a lot of the musical artists and people, they kind of contributed to that.
Who were your favorite athletes? But you can go all the way back to childhood on this one if you want to. But who were the people that, when you were falling in love with sports, who were the athletes that were a big part of that for you?
I just saw him at the tail end of his career. I was like 9 or 10 years old when he was 11, when he was fighting at the end. I grew up in Chicago, so Ernie Banks was my hero as a kid. And then subsequently after that, Dick Butkus, Gale Sayers, those kind of players. And I loved. I was a huge baseball fan and played baseball in high school and beyond. And I was a huge admirer of. I was a little older, but the Orioles teams that had Brooks Robinson and Frank Robinson and those great pitching staffs, and Earl Weaver, who was, he's probably been the subject of your tweets and other things more than almost any human being, perhaps.
Yeah, he's up there. He's great content.
He's high on the list anyway.
Yeah, he's high on the list. Earl Weaver had, he did things that you couldn't make up somebody that was better than Earl Weaver. He was incredible.
He is almost a fictional character, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. It just, when I need a go-to tweet, if I'm having a little bit of a slow day creatively, I can always count on Earl Weaver to
you probably got
hit
a
a
list
homer.
of 6 or 7, right? That you can say, okay, wait, I got to go there.
Yes, absolutely. I think my favorite one is he went out to the mound one time. Ross Grimsley, if you remember him,
Sure,
left-hander was pitching, and he went out to the mound. Grimsley was getting knocked around, and he asked Grimsley. He says, "If you know how to cheat, start now," which I just absolutely love that one.
Yeah, can you learn a spitter in 50 seconds? Because you're going to need one. Yeah, that's right. Now that's great stuff. I love that. That's a great story.
Well, speaking of great stuff, Al, great stuff having you on the show today to get your thoughts on these things, your memories. Really appreciate you. I know that you've been a friend of the Super 70s Sports account for a long time.
I love it.
So it's a
Makes my
honor
day
to have you on here. Yeah. Thank you so much, my
before
friend.
A big fight or whatever you want. I'm happy to come back and visit. We can still kick around some more stuff. So whenever you feel like it,
Let's do it. Too much good stuff to get to in one show, but would love to have you back, my friend. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Al Bernstein, International Boxing Hall of Famer. Great guy, just a great guy. And as I said, he's been interacting with me on Super 70s. On the podcast about 7-8 years ago, he was hip to Super 70s before a lot of people were. So we love Al for that as well. Ronnie T-shirts, did you learn anything about boxing today? Any thoughts on the wisdom that was shared today by Al Bernstein?
I was desperately hoping you were going to give me Ronnie's one question, because we finally could have gotten the definitive answer on whether or not you could beat a bantamweight from Al. I mean, what a missed opportunity.
Dude, okay. Well, that's going to be the number one thing that we have to I think I know what Al's answer is going to be, but when Al comes back on the show, we'll let him take his turn flogging me as well. I'm never going to be able to live that one down. All right, my thanks today to Kenny Lofton, Al Bernstein, Ronnie fucking T-shirts. You can find us on Fox Nation. You can find us on OutKick.com, YouTube, Spotify, Apple is where you'll find the podcast, as well as anywhere else that you love to get your podcast. We're everywhere. You can find me on X every day, and we will see you once again tomorrow right here on The Ricky Cobb Show. Hey, OutKick fans on YouTube, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and make your way over to OutKick.com where you can watch the full episode.